Hello and welcome to Easter Seals Florida Credit Card Online Processing Training. We process credit cards through a virtual terminal with Wells Fargo called Authorize.net. This training is to introduce you to the features of the software so that you can begin successfully processing credit cards online. Once you have viewed this training and emailed me the answers to a brief quiz at the end, I will provide you with your new login and password. The agenda for the training: we will be reviewing the PCI Compliance requirements, logging into Authorize.net. I'll show you how to process credit card transactions, recurring transactions. We'll briefly talk about the customer information manager and how that works for you. We'll look at how to view unsettled transactions, reports, and then, like I said, the brief quiz. PCI Compliance. Since we're an organization that processes credit cards, we are bound to the rules and regulations of PCI Compliance, which requires us to do or not do certain things to protect credit card data. You are personally responsible for the protection of the credit card information that you have access to in order to process them for payment, but the organization is required to set up processes to ensure that the information is protected as well. We are required to mask the credit card number. This means that after processing a credit card, we must black out all of the numbers except for the last four. When processing credit cards through the online tool, it automatically does this, but we have to also remember to do this on forms that we may be using that have credit card numbers on them for processing. If the form needs to be kept for other reasons, all of the digits except for the last four of the card number must be redacted. We do not email credit card numbers ever. Only the person processing the credit card should have access to it. When disposing of credit card information, it must be put in a shredder or a locked shredding bin. We cannot store credit card numbers on spreadsheets or paper files to process when requested by cardholders. And if any problems arise, please contact me, the Corporate Compliance Officer, immediately so that I can take the steps needed to remain compliant. So now let's look at some of the functions of Authorize.net. Of course, the first thing we would need to do is log in. Now we must log in on the server. So we have to log into the remote desktop and then go to our Google Chrome internet browser on the desktop in order to log in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So if you look, I'm logging into Google Chrome. And then you're going to go to Authorize.net. And it's going to take us to the initial Authorize.net login screen. And then you would just go to Sign In and Merchants, and then you'll be on the main login screen. However, you can also just type into the web browser account.authorize.net, and it's going to take you directly to the login screen automatically, and then you just enter your username and password. I would suggest creating a shortcut so that you can get to this easily without having to go through all those steps. But so I'm going to go ahead and log in so we can view some of the features on Authorize.net. So this is the main screen that you'll see once you log in. On the side, there are different tools that you can use, different headings for different menu items: tools, reports, search, and account. You can go to any of those areas for certain information. And then at the top, it also has the same labels for you to go to, so you can get to it from the top or from the side. Now on this, one thing I want to show you under the account section is the user profile. Here is where you will see your user information, so your name, your login ID, whatever I put for your title, which you can always adjust or change, and all your contact information. If you want to edit any of this information, feel free to do so by selecting Edit Profile. Also, you'll see your permissions on here. If you have permissions for a certain process, you will see a check mark next to it, and if you do not, you'll see that circle, the red circle with the line through it. One thing that you'll see that you don't have access to would be the create refund transactions. As you know, that goes to accounting, but you'll see a red circle with a line through it for that, or for uploading transaction batches, you'll see one for that as well. Now there's also another thing I wanted to show you. So if you select edit profile, this is where you would edit your user information. You can't change your login ID, but you can edit your user information. It also has a spot for email notification settings. So for you, you'll notice that I have nothing checked. The reason for that is because it's not user specific. So although you have your own login and you're logging into your own separate login, everything is related to all of the processes in Authorize.net for the organization. So for instance, if you select transaction receipt, you won't just receive emails for your transactions, you'll receive it for everyone in the organization, which can be kind of, annoying when it comes to your email. Even for things like failed transaction notice or credit card expiration, all of that stuff, you'll get emails for everyone across the organization. So feel free, you can select whatever you want to, whatever emails you would like to receive. If you want to receive newsletters or technical notices and things like that, but I haven't selected any email notices for you. If you do decide you want something, you would select it and then press submit, and it will update your profile. So now we're going to look at how to process a credit card on the virtual terminal. So I'm going to take you back to the home screen. So you select home, and then we're back at that main screen that you will always see when you log in. There's 3 ways to get to the virtual terminal, which is where you process the credit cards. Underneath the home button, there is a shortcut right underneath it saying virtual terminal. Then if you look at the tools section, there's virtual terminal right underneath that. And then also the tools section at the top, you can select, and it takes you directly to the virtual terminal. So that's probably one of the quicker ways to get there, either that or the shortcut under the home. But once you're on the virtual terminal, there are certain things that you would basically, it automatically selects charge a credit card and authorize and capture. Just leave those as they are. And then there's required fields that you have to enter to make sure that the card processes. So I've highlighted them here so that you know which items are truly required. The card number, expiration date, and the amount automatically are required. That's a given. However, you also are required to put in the CVV number or the card code number. That can be found on the back of most credit cards. There's normally a 3-digit number on the back, next, like right in the signature line. For American Express, it is the 4 numbers on the front of the card, right above the card numbers. They're written a little bit smaller on the right-hand side above the card number. But those numbers are required. So when you're getting any card information from the donor or client or whoever's calling in to pay something, make sure you get the CVV number as well. You also are required to put something in the invoice number line. We don't have invoices usually, so we require that you put in your login ID in that line. I'll show you a couple of places later where this helps in reconciling and in reporting and things like that, because if you keep in mind, all of us across the organization are using the credit card terminals, but it's not separate, so everyone's processing credit cards. So you want to make sure in this section you put your user ID, which here I put mine, which is rblake44. In the description, it is a required field. However, what you put in there is up to you. You can put the client name, you can put the event it's related to, whichever works for you, to remind you of what the charge was for. Then you're also required to put the first and the last name and the billing address. The billing address will be whatever billing address they've put for their credit card. So when you're getting the information from the consumer or the person that's the credit card holder, make sure you get their billing address, and you let them know that it's not the mailing address, it's not the physical address, it's whatever they have as a billing address for their credit card. This is all required information because it will not process without the CVV number, and it will not process without the correct billing address. Once you've gathered all the information, you would just press submit, and it will take you to the screen shown here. This is a transaction confirmation screen, so that once you press submit, it's going to process the card. If it's accepted, you'll see accepted. If it's declined, you will see declined. You'll also see the information, what was processed. And then you'll have the option to view a printable receipt. It doesn't automatically print a receipt for you, but you will select the view printable receipt button, and it's going to pop up your printer. And then you select how many copies you want. Most times you'll need at least 2, maybe 3 if you also have the customer there. But you will, print out, select the copies you need, and then press print, and it'll print them. You can also from this screen start a new transaction. So if you're processing a bunch of cards for the day, you can actually just go on to the next card if you need to, and just by pressing enter a new transaction. So now That's how you would process a credit card. Now, recurring billing. So let's say you recurring billing is when a client or donor wants their card to be processed automatically for a certain amount. For instance, a parent has to pay $20 at one of the child care centers weekly, and they want their card to be processed continually each week. Or a donor wants to donate $50 a month and wants it to be processed automatically. Using recurring transaction feature allows you to enter the information and set a date for their card to be processed. So there are two ways to get to this on the online tool. So I'm going to go back to the home screen so you can see how to get there. Two different ways. You can either go scroll down on the left panel, and under tools you'll see recurring billing, or at the top you can select tools, and then on the menu on the side will say recurring billing. So you will select recurring billing, and this is what you'll see. This is where right now we have 9 recurring transactions. If you select the subscriptions, you'll see the actual each subscriber, which is each recurring transaction. You'll see that detail. If you wanted to create a new one, you would just select create a new ARB subscription, and it'll look like what's shown here. Now I've created a slide for you to be able to see what's required on that screen as well. The card number, the expiration date, and the amount, once again, are definitely required in order to what amount they want you to process when the recurring billing does process. You don't need the CVV number, the card code number, on this screen when it's setting up a recurring. That is the only time you won't need it. The subscription name is a required field. However, we request that you use your location for this, and you'll see why later. There's certain spots where you need to see you have multiple recurring transactions in there. You want to be able to see yours easily, so you will put the location. So if it's West Palm Beach Development, you put that, or Daybreak, or Murray Center, whatever it is, you put the location there. And then once again, in the invoice number section, anytime you see invoice number, that is where you put your login ID. That is a requirement. Now in the description, you don't have to put anything, it's not required, but feel free to use it however you need to remind you of what the recurring transaction was for. Now in the subscription interval, this is where you're going to select how often you want this to process. If they want it to be weekly, there's a section for every week. There's a section for every month. There's a section if you need a certain amount of days and it doesn't fall within those categories. You can also select every and put however many days you want it to be. If you want it annually, you put every 12 months. It depends. So whatever the subscription interval is, you need to put that there. And of course that will be discussed between you and the donor or the client. Now also under the subscription duration, this is where you're going to put the start date, the end date, if there's a certain amount of time that you want this to be processed. It automatically populates whatever today's date is and the start date. So please make sure that if the start date is not the day that you're creating this, that you change it to whatever date you want the card to be processed, because it's going to process on the day that you have as a start date. You'll also, if you have an end date, so for instance, let's say the parent is only going to bring their child for 6 months, you would put that end date, and it'll stop processing their card automatically after 6 months. If the donor tells you they only want to do the donation for a year, $50 a month, but only for a year, you can put the end date there, or you can even put how many occurrences. So if you wanted to process once a month for 12 months, you can end after 12 occurrences, and it automatically stops processing on the end date that you put. Now if there is no end date, then you just put no end date, and it'll keep processing until you stop it. Now when you'll scroll down, and you'll also see on the screen, when you're setting up a recurring, you have to put the customer billing information. So that'll be their first name and their last name, and of course their billing address will be required to put on this page as well. So you have to make sure you obtain all that information when you're setting up a recurring processing for a when requested. Now you've set up the recurring, so this is what I want to show you. So like I said, there's across the organization, you guys are all going to be setting up recurring. So that's why in the subscriber name, you want to make sure you put the location, so that if you come look at this and you need to figure out something about a recurring, you can immediately see where your recurring items are. So that's why we put in the subscriber name, we put the location. Now, Customer Information Manager is the next thing I wanted to show you. The Customer Information Manager allows you to store clients, donors, clients or donors as a customer profile, including their PCI compliant credit card information. It actually saves it max so that you don't see the full information, but it does allow you to save that under PCI rules. You could use this if you have clients that have given you permission to process their cards each month, but their monthly amounts change every month. Process a payment right from their profile. Or if you have a donor that wants you to keep the card on file to process whenever they want to make a donation. So they may not tell you a certain amount each month, but they may say, keep my card on file and I'll call you when I want to make a donation. You can do that as well. And then when you need to process it, you're able to do that from the Customer Information Manager screen. So I want to show you how to get there. Number one, there's 2 ways to get there. So we're going to go back to the home screen. And if you go to Tools, underneath Tools, you'll see Customer Information Manager, but also on the side of the top, if you select Tools, on that menu on the side, you'll see it as well. So when you select Customer Information Manager, you're taken to this screen that shows you all the different profiles that are already set up. And then if you want to add a profile, you would just select Add a Profile, and you'll see the screen shown here. Now, I did create a page for you to see what is required. So with the Customer Information Manager, the Customer ID is a required section. It helps you to be able to look right at it and see when you need to process. I would suggest using an ID that you use at another software as well. So if you have used Razor's Edge, like our development team, if there's a donor ID somewhere in there, I would suggest using that as the customer ID. Or for those of you that use ProCare, if you already have a customer ID in ProCare, I suggest you use that same customer ID here, so that you are so that when you need to look back at it, you automatically know what it's related to. A description, I would suggest putting the location for that as well. And then in the required payment profile section, you're going to enter the first name, last name of the person, the card being processed, the full billing address, just like before, and then you're going to enter their card number and their expiration date. This information is what's going to be used when processing a card. So once you put all that in and you press save, all that will be kept on there. And then when you actually need to process a card, I'm going to show you how to get to that. So let's say you have you need to process a card. You're going to select the profile that you want to process, and then you're going to see the profile information there, and then the payment profile section. All you would do is select charge, and it's going to take you to a screen that's going to allow you to put the account in and all that information in, so that you can charge the person's card for the amount that you need to charge it for. And then it'll look like this. Once you select that you want to charge the payment profile, it's going to ask you for the transaction type, like what's it for, your invoice number, which once again is your login ID. So out here I will put rblake44. The card code, this is where you're going to need the CVV code, even though you haven't stored it. You don't store it when you create the Customer Information Manager profile, but you are going to need it. So this is going to prompt you to have to contact the client or the donor to make sure, or if they contact you, make sure you get that CVV number so that you can put it in there. So if you notice, okay, your client has $200 worth of charges, you're going to call them and say, hey, I have $200 worth of charges for you this month. I have your credit card on file. Do you want me to process it? If they say, yeah, go ahead and process the card, ask them for their CVV number, because you're going to need that, the card code number, to process. Or the donor, if the donor calls you and says, hey, this month I want to give a $500, you have my card on file, right? You say, yeah, I do, but I need your CVV number. And you do that, so that you are going to have to get that information. And then you put the amount and you select submit. This is going to process the card, and it's going to throw it into that transaction detail section that I'll be showing you later, without you having to go through all the other nuances of processing a card. So now that you've learned a couple different ways to process a credit card, I want to show you how to review your work. So we need to look at unsettled transactions so that you can be able to review what you've done and make sure that you make any corrections if needed. So I'm going back to the online screen for you, and we're going to go to the home section, because there's 3 different ways to get to those unsettled transactions. You can either go underneath the home button. There's a little shortcut for unsettled transactions, which just means transactions that you've processed but they haven't settled to go to the bank yet, so they're still able to be corrected. You can also go down to the search section, and there's unsettled transactions. And then if you at the top, if you select search, you'll be able to get to unsettled transactions. But we're going to use the shortcut. So we go to unsettled transactions, and you see every transaction processed for the entire organization for that day is going to be on there. The batches are settled daily, but until they are settled, every batch for that day, every credit card transaction is going to be there. This is why it's important to use your login ID for your invoice number, because you're going to see every transaction. You want to be able to zone in on the ones that are yours immediately to check to make sure there's no duplicates, to make sure that there's the information, the numbers correct, and things like that. Because if they are not, this is the point that you would actually void the transaction. So I have a slide here to show you what multiple transactions will look like. So this is an unsettled batch, and there's like 3 transactions here. You see my invoice number, so my login ID is under the invoice number section, and there's one here that doesn't. So now if you had a number of them, you would notice, oh, well, you have to figure out who processed that card. And on our end, it also helps if there's a problem with the card, if you need help on something, if we didn't get a receipt for something, we can go in here and look at the report and see who processed the card as well. So for this one that doesn't have a login ID, we wouldn't know who processed it. We would have to go through a lot of processes to figure out who did this. You also can see the transaction ID, the date, and then the payment amount. So definitely make sure you double check to make sure the customer is right, make sure that the payment amount is correct, because if not, you do have the option to void here. So what you would do, just to show you what it looks like, there's a little link, hyperlink with the transaction ID. If you select that, it shows you this detail, transaction detail for this particular card. You have an option to void. You have an option to create a ARB subscription. So from this point, you can actually create a recurring from it, and then it'll populate everything into the recurring billing, and all you have to do is put the interval, how often you want it to process, the amount you want to process. So you can create a recurring from here. You can also print this detail if you need. But if we were going to void, you will select the void. If indeed the transaction shouldn't have been processed, or you see there's a duplicate or anything like that, you will select void. Once you select void, it's going to pop up with this warning screen. Are you sure you want to void the transaction? You select OK if it is correct, and then you're going to see a transaction status that's going to let you know the void result. You can print that for your records so that if you need to look back at it later, or if you need to prove that it was voided, we'll have that information, so you'll be able to do that. Now, so of course you want to make sure you check all of your work and make any corrections needed, because at the end of the evening, the batches will automatically settle. Once they are settled, anything that is incorrect, we will have to refund, which means we'll have to go through the process of contacting the CFO to get approval for a refund, and then the accounting department doing the refund for you. So you want to make sure that you check as much as you can at this level so that you can avoid it or do whatever before the batch settles. So now once the batch settles, you can always look back. There's a reporting that you can do. You can always look back at settled batches as well. I want to show you that. So if you go to Home, there is a section for reports on the side panel, and then there's reports at the top. The only report you're ever going to use is a transaction detail. So if you select reports at the top, it takes you automatically to that. You see there's 2 options. There's settled transactions and there's declined transactions. You want to pick either one is fine. If you wanted to see what transactions were declined, if you want to look back at something like that, you can. If you wanted to see settled batches, you would just select the date that you processed. So let's say it was the 25th. Let's say July 25th we processed. You would select that, and then you just run the report. You'll see every single transaction that was settled on that report, so you can look back at it. If, let's say someone called you and said, hey, I noticed my card was processed twice on the 25th. It seems like I have a duplicate charge. You can actually go in here and look at that, and you can see, yes, there's a duplicate charge for this particular customer. You also will see the invoice number. You'll see your login ID, so you can spot your items very easy. And then if you need to, you can look at more things. So like on this settlement transaction, you also can set up a recurring. So if someone calls you and says, hey, you know what, you processed my credit card last month, I want to go ahead and use that credit card, and can we set up a recurring charge? Can you just process it every month for $200? You can go into your settled transactions and select the transaction ID, and even at this point you have an option of creating an ARB subscription, a recurring batch. So you click that, it populates everything into a recurring thing, and you set up the intervals and all of that from here. Also, if you do find that there's a problem with a charge, this is where we would refund it. So that all the information is still accurate, we would just select refund, and we would be able to process a refund right to the person's card. So old, new charges, it doesn't matter. We will have an option to go back to it if we need to, and by just pressing on the transaction ID. So this is a report you will probably use if you wanted to research anything. Every card process since we've been in this particular software is captured here, so you can always look back on them. So now, once you've processed your cards, you'll need to prepare the documentation to be sent to the accounting department so that we can enter it into our accounting software. So it's very important that you know about receding and things like that. This would include writing receipts for each transaction and adding the transactions to the cash receipt spreadsheet. Now, for more information on that, we do have a whole separate training entitled Cash Receding and Depositing. You can either see it on demand in the ESU On Demand, or you can sign up for a live training in the ESU catalog. But it'll go in detail as far with regards to the processes for receding and things like that. But even credit card transactions have to be receded and added to the cash receipt spreadsheet. So it's very important that you watch that training to gain all the knowledge you need to make sure that the process is done from beginning to end. So you've processed your card. Now it's time to turn in the information. Now, reconciling your batch. I wanted to briefly go over how you would make sure that you've captured every credit card and made sure that you've receipted every credit card and everything's been captured on the cash receipt spreadsheet. So I wanted to review that with you. If you're going to reconcile your batch, the first thing you want to do is run an unsettled transaction report from Authorize.net. And just a reminder as to where that is, if you go to Home, there's a little shortcut here. So if you select Unsettled Transactions, you will have every transaction ran for that day. You can just select Print, and it will print those transactions for you so that you can review them. And once you print that, you want to make sure that you highlight the transactions that you completed so that you can add them together to get a total. Because, like I said, it's transactions throughout the organization, you're going to have your batch there, but there's other people who've ran cards too. So that's why you use that login ID information. You can highlight all the ones that you processed, add that number up, and write it on the side so that you know what the total of your transactions were. And that number is important. Now, you're also going to total your yellow receipts that you wrote for each transaction. So you've written all your receipts. You want to make sure you run an adding tape or something like that so that you can get a total of all the receipts written. You're also going to total the cash receipt spreadsheet, and that's very easy. It's just highlighting on the transactions and you'll see a total at the bottom. Now, so you compare the total of your unsettled transaction report, the total of your yellow receipts, and the total of the cash receipt spreadsheet. All three totals should match. This way we know every single deposit, every single credit card transaction has been receipted. So you want to make sure all three totals are the same number. If the totals do not match, please find a discrepancy and fix it, because all three need to match. It's important for all three to match. If you need help reconciling, if something's wrong and you can't figure out what it is, a lot of times it's just a number's transposed or something's forgotten or something's missed. But if you can't figure it out, you can always call us. We can we're a second set of eyes to look at it, or even your supervisor or another coworker, just to review your work. And that second set of eyes sometimes makes it a little easier to find where the numbers are off. But in the end, in order for your process to be complete, all three totals have to match. Once you've done all that, everything matches and you're good to go, you want to prepare the deposit information for headquarters. So from the top, you'll have the yellow receipts. You'll have the copies of the credit card receipts, because remember you've put that together, and any other backup related information. If you have, for some reason, the form has a credit card number on it, that credit card number needs to be redacted in order to follow PCI compliance. It may be even a good idea to go ahead and put your unsettled transaction total report in that batch as well, if you so desire. But you definitely need the yellow receipts and a copy of the credit card receipts attached. Staple them in the upper left hand corner, and then they are required to be sent in the pouch on the first of the month and the third Monday of the month. Make sure to put your deposit batch in the very next pouch. So if you do everything you do before the first of the month needs to be in that first of the month pouch. Everything you do between the first of the month and the third Monday needs to be in that third Monday pouch. So everything is accounted for with regards to all the credit card transactions that you've processed. So now, to get credit for this training and to receive your new login credentials, you must send me an email with the answers to the questions that will be provided on the next few slides. There are 5 questions, one on each of the next 5 slides. Please pause the video and write down your answer, and then once you can replay it, you can play again and go on to the next one. Can you email credit card information? Yes, no, only if sending is secured, don't know. Question 2, who should have access to credit card data? Only the person processing the card, everyone in the department, other clients in the program, it doesn't matter. Question 3, how do you dispose of papers with credit card information on them? Throw it in the recycling bin, put it in the garbage, shred it, toss it out the window. Question 4, you can store credit card information on spreadsheets or on paper to use when requested by cardholder. Is that true or false? And 5, what information is not required when processing an online credit transaction? First and last name, full billing address, CVV, or phone number. Please email your answers to rblake@fl.easterseals.com, and I will then provide you with your login and your password. I hope that this training covered everything needed to successfully process credit cards online using Authorize.net. Once I receive your email, I will send your login information along with a link to some mini videos to use as a refresher for different aspects of Authorize.net. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me or anyone else in accounting, and thank you for attending this training.